Hey, this is Heidi Dawson. If you love all things health and wellness and style of any kind, hang out here with me each week. I'm obsessed with never ending improvement, and it's all in an effort to help each one of us live a wildly successful lifestyle. Subscribe today so you don't miss a thing. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 501 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. So, episode 501, you are just as important and just as monumental in my book as episode 500. Just saying. Honestly, though, I have the most unbelievable story for you guys that played out like a real live horror movie that happened to me and my husband this weekend as we were on our glamping adventure in the Smokey Mountains. It was insane. You're not going to believe it. But first, I hope you guys are all feeling the just amazing and optimistic about all of the opportunities that are coming your way. Remember, you get what you're looking for, and you may not realize this. You may not be aware of what you're looking for even because it might be subtle. It's really all about what you're focused on, because what you're focused on the most is what you're looking for. So if you think you're a victim, you are. If you think the world is your oyster, it is. So what do you see when you go out? Is the world against you, or is it consistently collaborating so that things line up to always work in your favor? Either one of those is true. It just depends on your worldview. And that's truer more than you can ever imagine. All right, so I talked a few episodes ago about how my nail guy inspired us to take a few more weekend trips. And so we booked a long weekend of camping in the Smokey Mountains. Now, Eric, my husband, says that we've moved past the whole setting up our own tent and using a shared public bathroom kind of camping. But I also love tent camping. So he actually did really good and found a happy medium. It's called glamping. Have you guys heard of that? It's basically tents that are already set up, and they have this great, comfortable, cozy king-size bed, and it's got a bathroom, and there's a wood-burning stove so you can keep yourself warm if you can start a fire, which my husband's very good at. So this glamping company in the Smokies has about 40 tents set up. It's like a valley or a bowl in the Smoky Mountains. Okay, so there's this main tent with breakfast and dinner to order, and campfires every night with gourmet s'mores set up for all their guests. It is so cool and so very quaint. Now, the best thing, and also the worst thing you'll come to see, is the fact that there's absolutely zero cell phone coverage. So you have no cell service whatsoever and no Wi-Fi, which means no X, no texts, and no phone calls in or out. So it's a total timeline cleanse, which we desperately needed. So we got there on Wednesday night late, and we were staying through Sunday. We were just in heaven the whole time, and we hiked during the day, and then we were relaxing in the evening and through the night. And Eric had our fire going in our tent, so it was keeping us warm because it was pretty cold. Like, it was 37 degrees at night, and we had these cozy dinners in the main tent, and then we would have s'mores by the campfire, and there would be other campers mulling around, and everyone's enjoying the campfire. It was everything we thought it would be. And then Saturday night really just started out like all the other nights. It was a quiet evening. We had s'mores by the fire. We made some new young friends that were sitting by the fire with us because no one has phones, right? So of course we had to do it the old way and talk to the people around us, you know how we used to do. But we met this darling young couple, and we learned all kinds of things about them. It was really fun. And then they learned some stuff about us too. And as the evening progressed, they sort of went into the main tent to listen to live music, and Eric and I decided that we were ready to go to our tent and get ready for bed. So we were all snuggled and cozy and warm, and we were sound asleep by 9:30. And all was well with the world until 11:30, almost on the dot, when we heard someone scream really, really loudly. And it woke us both up. And then we heard another scream, a loud one. And then that was followed by the most blood-curdling scream I had ever heard, and someone screaming, "Help me." Now, by this time of night, everyone in the camp was already in bed for the most part. By 11:30, everybody was shut down. And remember, we have no cell phone coverage, so there's no calling 911. So with the last scream, like, Eric has jumped out of bed, and he has unzipped the front of our tent and is standing there. And when the last scream came, I said, I said, Eric. And he said, I know, I'm going to see what's going on. Now, I know him, and I know that he is going to run towards if he thinks he can help. So I get to the front of the tent just in time to see him actually sprinting off our porch, sprinting across the landscape, cutting these two people off who are running as fast as they could away from the screams. Now, he's not sure if they're hurt or if they're involved in whatever was happening. And so he cuts them off and yells at them and is like, hey, what's going on? He quickly sees that they're a young couple who are terrified and had obviously been asleep as well. I mean, the guy was running in 37 degrees weather with no shoes on. She wasn't, I mean, they were obviously sound asleep like we were. Now they tell him, they're like, we don't know what happened. We're trying to run to the tent to get help. And by now, like, there's 6 other people running towards the main tent as well. 2 girls staying in the tent really close by also came running by. So we were starting to get a story formed by everyone who was closer to the tent than we were, because we were not very close. A couple had been arguing, and they heard what they thought was the man was just beating her up. And so she's screaming. Now, Eric looks at me, and I can tell he's going to go to that tent. But I begged him. I said, look, just stay with us. We don't know if the guy has lost his mind or has a gun. By that time, the screaming had stopped, and I wasn't sure if she was even alive at this point. So we finally, we made our way to the main community tent, where the only person working and left there was a young girl who was working as a night manager, and she was able to actually use the landline to call the police. So fortunately, there was a female off-duty, but she was out of jurisdiction, law enforcement officer, and she happened to be a guest there as well. And she had gone to the tent with another male guest to check on the woman. I didn't realize that they were doing that, but they were able to talk to the woman who had been screaming, and she was unharmed and extremely argumentative, though, and combative. And she specifically said, you do not call the police, and he is not a danger to me. So she'd been screaming all these horrible things. And we still have no idea. We have no clear picture of why there was all this screaming. In my mind, this horrible man had tried to kill his wife. Now, my husband, who's always the logical one, said, we don't know yet what happened, so he wasn't going to rush to judgment. We know she's alive now, and the police are on the way, so all we could do was wait. And it took them quite a bit. It took about 15 minutes for the police to get there, which is actually quite scary. But we were kind of out in nowhere. So 2 sheriff cars show up, and the night manager points them in the direction of the tent. And they go, and they're there for about 20 minutes or so before turning around and just leaving. Like, we have no idea what they did or what they were doing. They did not tell us anything. They just left the premises without telling anyone, including the night manager. I mean, did they really just leave with the couple still in the tent? Would they do that? I mean, the people in the tents around them are now too scared to go back to their tent, period. I mean, there were young girls and this young couple. And so as we're standing outside the main tent in disbelief that the police left without telling anyone anything, we see this figure walking down the dark gravel road. It's from a nightmare, I promise you. Anyway, this is a woman, and she isn't hurt, and she isn't crying, but she is extremely angry, and she doesn't care who knows it. And as she's walking up, she's yelling at one of the guys that was her neighbor tent, thanks a lot, thanks a lot. And she goes right up to the night manager and says, I specifically said not to call the police, and you did. Now you go get the kindling so I can start my fire. Now, the night manager was young, and you could tell she was trying to be, diplomatic. And she said nicely, look, we have to ask you and your husband to leave. You cannot stay here tonight. You have to leave the premises. To this, the woman says, they took him to jail. They took him to jail. He's gone. Now get me my fire starters and do not talk to me. My husband looked at me like, we now see who is a big part of the problem. Now, we were all very relieved to know at least he was gone so that the screaming and the fighting should be done. So by this time, we're walking back to our tent, and we see that just about every tent had their battery lights on. No one was sleeping at this point. And one young couple that was running towards us actually had to move tents. They couldn't sleep in the tent near their old tent anymore. The other ones slept with one eye open. Now, the next morning, we run into our young friends that we had met that I talked about from the bonfire the night before. And I asked them how they were doing because they were actually up towards, because they told us where their tent was, and it was right by all this stuff that was going on. And so I was like, hey, did you guys get any sleep? I mean, are you okay? And they seemed awfully calm to me. And we noticed that they also hadn't come out last night when everyone else was running and panicking. And when I asked if they were okay, she kind of laughed and she was like, oh yeah, we're fine. We watched the whole thing from beginning to end. She said, we unzipped our canvas window because they have these zipped windows where it's still a screen, but they can see everything. She goes, and we could watch the whole thing from our bed because they were right there, like they were right next to us. And she goes, yeah, they were drunk and there was a scuffle, but the woman had started it by tackling him. And then he hit her to try to get her away from him. But the crazy thing was, that was when she was screaming, like she was screaming bloody murder, and she was screaming horrible things like rape, like screaming help me and screaming fire. They said she wasn't in danger at all when she was screaming that. Her husband was on the opposite side of the tent, nowhere near her. He was just calmly just asking her for his keys, which she evidently was holding and pressing the alarm because the car alarm was going off. But he just was calmly standing there going, give me the keys. I need my keys. And that's when she started screaming and actually punching all the buttons on the car alarm, to set the car alarm off. So they had arrested the wrong person, so it seemed. From all perspectives, we all thought she was the one being abused. And it turns out that was not the true story that night. As Eric and I were trying to get back to sleep, I said, well, I guess we won't be doing this again. And I kind of laughed and we dozed off. We did get a little bit more sleep that night. But the next day, Eric, always the voice of reason, said, we had such an amazing time. We cannot let this 3-hour episode stain the whole 5-day experience. I mean, we've been in a literal hurricane in Cabo for my little sister's 30th birthday, and we still had a wonderful time. You see, we can dramatize it and make it so that we never go hiking or camping again, because that's sometimes what we do in our heads. Our brain is telling us this is unsafe because it would really prefer for us to just shut ourselves in the house and not even leave to buy groceries, which is actually a possibility now. Some people are doing that. But things like that can happen anywhere, and they can happen anytime. And as he was saying that, I thought, you know what? He's right, as usual. I mean, I can't wait to do this again. And we will, as soon as we can, because that's what it means to live. You don't stop living because of a setback. You don't stop living because things turn out differently than you expected. And you don't stop living because of one scary episode. You get back up. You brush yourself off. And you start again. My challenge to you this week is to ask yourself, are you living to the limits of your highest self? Or are you living to the limits of the thoughts that try to keep you safe but afraid? Share this with 3 people who deserve to live to the limits of their highest self. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a few days. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends, because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together, and I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.